This is where you run into the downsides of having a fully sick and hectic workshop. It's got massive ceilings. You can't hang stuff off it to paint it. This means there has to be compromises somewhere. Having high ceilings requires critical thinking. I'm unsatisfied. In case you hadn't guessed, this episode is about painting. And in case you also hadn't guessed, I finished the chassis. And it looks bloody fantastic. Now this has put me in a slightly unfortunate situation, because it means everything from this point onwards has to be as perfect as the chassis, otherwise I'll be unsatisfied with it. Now while I was painting the chassis, I also painted these little arm things, so those are all brand new looking and ready to go. And in case you were wondering, 3.5 litres. And this involved finishing my welds, getting rid of all the grease, wire wheeling the whole chassis, rust treating the bits that needed rust treating, and finally, 3 coats of your finest black paint. And as you saw in the things I've done in the background, the diffs do not look quite as good as the chassis. I didn't think this would be much of a problem, but seeing them side by side shows the contrast, and I can't handle that. So today, I will be talking about painting. Slightly again. Now as usual, I've watched videos about people doing this, and one of the things I hate the most are people who don't strip the diffs before they paint them, and they paint directly over the brake lines, they paint over all the vacuum hoses for the lockers, and generally, it looks shit. Now I've already got ahead of the game. I've started draining the oil, and I've given them a degrease and a pressure wash. I know, I'm an overachiever, so you know what's coming next. So this is where the 10 mils go. Now this is a mostly stripped diff, or at least as stripped as I'm prepared to do it. There are a couple of things that might trigger some of you. Firstly, I'm not removing the diff center. There's nothing wrong with it, and I'd have to paint it anyway, so why bother taking it out just to paint it separately? The other thing I'm leaving in is the rear locker actuator. I can't get it out. So what I can do is paint over it without much care, and this will just unscrew at a later date. But that's a problem for future me. Now when you're as clueless about painting as I am, you spend a lot of time reading the instructions on the back of the tin. And this one says do a thin coat, wait 5 minutes, and then do another coat. Repeat 3 times. So that's what I did. Now that's already 100 times better than it was. That's coat 1. I'm going to do about 3 or 4 of these. And the results are quite good. Now the final result is something like this. There are still a couple of bits that I'm not pleased about, like that weird little actuator I mentioned earlier, but that's a bit I could just unbolt and replace, so I'm not too fussed about getting paint all over that for now. Aside from that, there's some bits of the diff that were a little bit more pitted.
Get pitted, so pitted like that.
And even though I removed all the rust, it's still visible through the paint. But it's a differential, not a work of art. I feel slightly more satisfied now. Fiddlesticks. Now as you can see, these wheels look a little bit tired. So guess what's happening in the next episode? That's right, I'll be making the exhaust for this. Finally. And as a parting gesture, you can have a look at this phenomenal chassis. Yes, even though I say so myself. Press buttons. Bye.